Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Top of the Morning by Mint, your weekday newscast that brings you five major stories from the world of business. It's Thursday, April 3rd, 2025. This is Nelson John. Let's get started. US President Donald Trump is turning up the heat on global trade, unveiling sweeping reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd, a day he now calls Liberation Day. Speaking from the Rose Garden, Trump declared, "It's our turn to prosper," framing the move as a long overdue correction to years of unfair trade practices. What's changing? New tariffs on key trade partners. India at 26% tariffs. China 34%. European Union 20%. Japan 24%. Automobiles 25% tariff on foreign-made cars. Trump singled out India's 70% levy on US motorcycles, calling it an example of the horrendous imbalances that have hurt American industry. His new reciprocal tariff policy means Indian exports to the US will now face a 26% duty, a direct response to what Trump claims is India's 52% tariff burden on American goods. "It's about fairness," Trump declared, calling this move a declaration of economic independence. The White House also confirmed a 10% blanket tariff on all imports from April 5th, with higher levies on nations with large trade surpluses from April 9th. Trump promised historic tax cuts while assuring Americans that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid would remain untouched. His message to US trading partners is clear: lower your tariffs or face American retaliation. "If you want zero tariffs, build your products here in America," he said, touting rising US manufacturing investment. President Trump also argued that the US had been looted for decades, placing the blame on past administrations. He vowed to punish countries that impose higher tariffs on American goods, but insisted his measures are still kind reciprocal tariffs. Now, what's at stake for India? The US is India's largest export market, accounting for billions in trade across IT services, pharmaceuticals, engineering goods, and apparel. Experts warn that uncertainty could dampen investor sentiment, especially in sectors like semiconductors and electronics, where over 85% of India's exports go to the US. Ajay Sahai, head of India's Export Federation, says, "Compared to Vietnam and China, we are in a better position, but we need an early trade deal with the US to minimize the damage." Talks on a bilateral trade agreement are already underway. Is this the beginning of a global trade war? Beyond India, Trump's tariffs are expected to disrupt global trade flows, with OECD already warning of a slowdown in global GDP. For India, the road ahead will be about balancing trade talks, diversifying export markets, and pushing back diplomatically. With global markets bracing for impact, the big question is, will other countries retaliate, or will this strategy force trade partners to rethink their tariffs on US exports? One thing is certain: Trump has once again shaken up the global trade. With a scorching summer ahead, India is bracing for a record electricity demand, and that means more coal. To keep power plants well stocked, Indian Railways has ramped up coal transportation, increasing daily rakes from 440 to 470 in FY26. Currently, 415 rakes move coal daily for power. Given the demand outlook, we are expected to need 470 rakes, which the railways will provide, said a source familiar with discussions. Peak power demand is projected to hit 270 gigawatts this summer, up from last year's 250 gigawatts. The ministry estimates domestic coal plants will need 906 million tons in FY26, up from 874 million in FY25. With heat waves expected across India, cooling-related power consumption is set to soar. The government is monitoring coal supplies closely to avoid shortages like in 2021. Stocks currently stand at 58 million tons, enough for 19 days. Coal remains India's power backbone, and with a record production crossing 1 billion tons in FY25, all eyes are on logistics to keep the lights on. India's green financing push is set for a potential upgrade. The government is considering raising its 25,342 crore rupees target for sovereign green bonds in FY26, banking on a stronger investor interest and policy momentum. A key factor? The greenium the premium investors are willing to accept for sustainable investments. While developed markets see a 3 to 8 basis point edge over conventional bonds, India's greenium has been limited to 2 to 3 basis points so far, reports Mint's Rick Kundu. We expect better returns this year given the global shift towards green finance, said a source familiar with the discussion. However, if demands fall short, the government may pivot back to traditional bonds. Since 2022, India has issued around 58,000 crore rupees in green bonds to fund projects in renewable energy, sustainable transport, and climate resilience. With a large target of 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel energy by 2030, securing the right funding mix is critical. Will investors bite? The next few months will set the tone for India's green finance ambitions. As the Indian Premier League IPL heats up, so does food delivery. Fast food chains are seeing a surge in orders, with Domino's reporting no signs of consumer fatigue. IPL continues to grow for us year on year, said Samir Ketarpal, CEO of Jubilant Foodworks. The pizza giant has doubled down on promotions, including its new 6-in-1 pizza for big gatherings. Streaming numbers back up the trend. Jio Hotstar reported a 40% spike in digital viewership, while TV audiences hit a record 253 million in the first 3 matches. Cricket has always been a high consumption occasion, said Nishant Kedia of Rebel Foods, which operates a Wendy's and Oven Story. The company increased marketing spends by 10 to 20% to capitalize on the cricket frenzy, reports Sunera Tandon. With IPL's extended duration ensuring sustained engagement, food brands are expecting another blockbuster season. Last year's sales jumped 60 to 70% during IPL, and companies are hoping for a repeated performance despite broader economic headwind. Harvard is bracing for a battle. With Trump cracking down on elite universities over allegations of anti-Semitism, Harvard's new president, Alan Garber, is trying to keep his school out of the crosshairs. But on Monday, the White House launched a review of Harvard's $9 billion in federal funding, just weeks after pulling $400 million from Columbia University over similar concerns. Garber has taken swift action, dismissing leaders at the university's Center for Middle Eastern Studies, cutting ties with the West Bank University, and reinforcing academic diversity guidelines. But critics say it's not enough. Former Harvard president Larry Summers accused the school of failing to represent Israeli perspectives, while some faculty argue Garber is caving to political pressure. Every person on the faculty I've spoken to thinks the same, said a Harvard professor, Ryan Enos. Meanwhile, Princeton has also been swept up in Trump's campaign, with the administration pausing dozens of its research grants. Princeton's president called it the greatest threat to American university since the Red Scare. Garber, acknowledging the stakes, warned that losing federal funds could cripple scientific research. But with Trump's task force investigating multiple schools, this fight is far from over. That's all for today. Thank you for joining in. We're eagerly looking forward to our next Top of the Morning episode, which will be packed with the latest in business news. Until then, this is Nelson John signing off. Have a tremendous Thursday.